So you then project a certain order, you project a certain agenda onto those stars, and now if any of those stars move out of place, now you say, that's going into chaos. Because it doesn't fit your structure. So therefore, the point I'm trying to make here is, it is always the mind that expects things to be in a certain order. Because if things weren't in a certain order, what is the purpose of the mind? The purpose of the mind is to recognize, to identify and to recognize, to perceive. To perceive what? Order. It is to perceive order. That is what you refer to as manifestations. Today you refer to them as manifestations. Before the Dhamma, you refer to them as things, entities. This pen is an entity. Or at least that's what you thought. But today you understand that this is simply a manifestation, and what this really is just, this is matter brought together and structured in a certain way, so therefore you don't call this chaos. But think about this for a second. Let's say, say there was a pile of sand, okay? And you were taking sand from this, mixing it up with maybe some aggregate and with cement, and you're trying to build something, you're trying to build a wall, okay? So, to create the mixture, you'll take some water, you'll take some sand, you'll take some aggregate, and you'll start mixing them together. Yeah, maybe you'll put into the cement mixer, or maybe you might take the, the spade, right? And start mixing it manually if you're doing it that way. Now, this is the sand, and this is the aggregate. You have the cement, you have water. You mix all these things and you now have cement. As you start taking some of the sand, say you're using a spade to take sand from here and you start adding it here, you'll say that this is becoming something. You're acting out your agenda on this. So there's a structure that's taking place here. What are the components of this structure? Cement, aggregate, you have sand and water. Okay? But as you start taking materials from here and start collecting them here, materials are leaving another place, aren't they? As they're accumulating in one place, they are reducing in another place. So you see, previously, this was also a structure. And so was this. So was the water. If you had, say, a barrel full of water, right? Now this barrel is going to be emptied as you start taking water out. This pile is going to start to flatten as you start taking the sand out. You bring these things here and you say, I'm forming something here. As you're forming something, aren't you also deforming something else? You are, aren't you? As you're forming one thing, something else is being deformed. So, does that not tell you then everything is always in some form in this universe? Before you took it and put it here, there was already a certain form. See? This form was already there. But you have a mind, and the mind can take on drishti, and the mind can take on an agenda, and then it tries to act out that agenda. And once you start doing that, this form starts to flatten out, starts to diminish, starts to disappear. But this form begins to appear. You're happy when this form takes place, but this is also a form. This is also a structure. So is this. Yeah? When you take, say you're baking a cake, right, and to make the mixture, you take flour, right, maybe you take icing sugar, and you start mixing it all together. So sugar and flour and water and maybe some butter, and you start mixing it together. As you do that, you're creating something, aren't you now? You're creating a structure. But as you're creating this structure, you're also deforming another structure. What other structures are you deforming? What about the butter? Maybe it came in a box. Maybe it came in a tub. Right? That is being deformed now. What about the flour? He was in a packet, right? And now, so if that packet was maybe a cuboid, right? Now you're taking flour from that, and that packet is now starting to flatten out. But you're creating the mixture somewhere else, and that is starting to take shape. So, as you're creating this shape, ladies and gentlemen, don't you realize that you're also causing chaos somewhere else? As you're giving this new, as you're creating this new structure, an existing structure is deforming. You can't not do that, can you? So that goes to prove to you, does it not, that everything is always in something. It's always in some kind of structure. But if that is not the structure that you want, if you have a specific structure in mind, if you have a certain agenda in mind, then you will keep on using your thoughts, words and actions. These are the sankhara. Your thoughts, words and actions will be acted out in order to take objects, elements, materials from this world that are already in some structure to create a structure of your own choosing. That is what we do. When you eat, that is what you do. See, take an apple for instance. Is that not a structure? Is there something particularly wrong about an apple? The way an apple is, its shape? Is there something you don't like about it? Is there something wrong about an apple? No, then why do you take it apart to create this? What's wrong with the way an apple is? Why don't you let the apple be? You eat the apple. As you eat the apple, what are you doing? You're taking it apart, you're disintegrating it so that it can be integrated in another shape. What shape is that? Whatever shape you are. So it's already, and it is always in a certain structure. Yeah? But you use energy to deform that structure and form another structure. And that is your structure. So when you feed your child the apple, what you're trying to do as a mother or a father is to deform the structure of the apple and form it in another way. That is what you're doing. Which is right and which is wrong? What's wrong about an apple? What's wrong about the structure of an apple? So why don't you just let it be? Why do you have to deform it and form something else? If it was up to God, then He wouldn't care. It doesn't matter which form it takes. But for you, it matters. You don't care about apples and the way apples are. Therefore, you will eat into the apple. You'll eat the apple. You'll start taking out parts of the apple because you want it reconfigured. You want it arranged in a different way. And that way is your way. Therefore, what we do as human beings is constantly keep on changing the outside world because we have an agenda to enact. That's what you're doing. Drushti allows your energy to be manipulated in certain ways. You manure the energy that you have access to. Don't you have access to energy? When you raise your arm, what are you doing? You're manipulating energy. You're maneuvering energy in a way that you want to, right? That's what you do when you raise your arm. When you speak, when you shake your head, right? You have access to lots of energy. When you're walking around, this is energy. So you're making use of energy to get something done. What is that something? Who decides that? Who has that agenda? You have that agenda depending on the drushti that you take, that you have in mind. That's what you're doing. But does the universe have a certain agenda for energy? The only agenda that the universe has is disintegration. For energy to return to a state of rest. Because when matter has energy, then matter is in a constant state of motion, and there's friction, and there's all sorts of things. But what the universe wants is to be at peace, to be at rest. But you have this energy form called the chitta. A chitta can take on drushti.